Shane, welcome.
Thank
Gosh,
you.
it's been quite a while, but I'm glad we have connected again. You're doing some amazing stuff. Love what you're doing, man. So appreciate you joining us today. For those watching today, Shane Ram is in Trinidad, Tobago,
I am.
and has been doing some amazing work. My God, when I talked to you just a little while ago, you're doing so many different training, focus, working with different people. Why don't you tell us a little bit? I'll let you do your own spiel rather than me wrecking it here. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Nagui, and thank you for this platform to be able to share with your audience some ideas that I hope will be useful to them. And in terms of what I've been up to lately, I mean, it's always trying to find better ways to sort of crack the code, so to speak, in how do we improve performance, and especially with leaders. And I mean, aren't we all leaders, right? So um, yeah, so I see a lot of people struggling, and I think that I myself have struggled. So it's really been about being able to find solutions that really work to improve performance at the end of the day. And the field of science and neuroscience is always changing and bringing new information. And people like yourself are creating new tools based on this, which is really super important. So the critical thing is that I help people rapidly change their behaviors, therefore change their results. Okay, so I love what you did with respect to even the picks that you did for the ad in terms of looking at assumptions, talking about the assumptions that we make. And there's this funny bit about the word assume. Like when you chop it up, the first three letters are ASS, and then it's you and me. Okay, so a lot of mistakes are made when we assume a lot of things, and really important. I am using AI just to validate my assumption. That's one of the tools was that the number one challenge or myth really, or assumption in leadership development is that these ingrained mindsets and habits that we have, the myth is that it takes a very long time to change, and that is not true. Okay, it's simply not true. And I mean, yes, if you use methodologies that are not optimal, then it might take a very long time. And that has been, really my consistent search for things that actually work. One, because there are a lot of things that don't work. The second thing is things that work, and now things that work faster. Okay, and we have busted that myth, so to speak, and therefore now we are able to help a lot of people to get their leadership behaviors that are desired, so to speak, in order to be effective in the workplace. And I think it's needed now more than ever, Nagui, because when you look on LinkedIn, for example, you hear about the toxic work culture, and then the result of that is a lot of people being burnt out and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's some of what I'm doing, and what I'm thinking and seeing out there in the world of business.
Yeah. And I think that I'm glad you said what you put forward there, because you and I both focus on accelerating the process with leadership. I do it through behavioral intelligence and Acumatch to expose that fairly quickly. And, you do it through the neuroscience side of things and, recognizing that. So why don't we talk a little bit about that, share some of that methodology of how do you apply the neuroscience to actually accelerate change, transformation, or self-awareness? What's your process for that?
Sure. Glad that you asked that question, Maggie. So I actually do have a process that I would have developed a few years ago. It's called Meta B leadership technology, and Meta from metamorphosis, meaning transformation, and B short for behaviors. Because I really love what you're doing and that whole idea of behavior intelligence. Because when you think about it, at the end of the day, when and how people judge leadership is really based on the behaviors of leaders. That's what people judge. That's what they see. That's what they interpret. Okay, they look for in order to interpret what kind of leader that is. So they look at behaviors. So um, I really think that that is critical, what you came up with. So understanding the behaviors, and we know when we change our behaviors, then we change the results that we're able to get. And then, but if you reverse engineer that, so results are driven by our behaviors, and our behaviors are really driven by our knowledge and skills, but more so at a leadership level in terms of our mindset and beliefs. Okay, so that's where our thinking process, the thought process, and where neuroscience and neuro has to do with the nervous system, which impacts how we feel, and but preceding that is our thoughts. So our thoughts create our emotions, which then dictate our actions and results. So I sort of reverse engineer getting results and understand it's a function of what we call mindset, beliefs, ways of thinking, which impact emotions, as the case may be. So Matter B and leadership technology, of course, it's primarily targeted at leaders, but it has wide application and technology, because there's a lot of science behind it. It's not an app per se, but technology is really the application of science. So that's Meta B leadership technology and what it stands for. And the first step, a really important step, is what we call insights and ownership. Let's get some insights. Thank you for putting that up. So first step is that we want to get insight. So what actually are the behaviors that people have? And I tend to start with the Johari window is normally a good starting point for me. I think what it does to it helps to put the client at ease, knowing that, okay, I'm not a bad person for having blind spots. It's just what it is. Okay, that we have these blind spots, we have these unknowns, and everyone has them. And putting the client at ease is really important, so that they take ownership of it. And that is a critical first step. They're not going to change unless they take ownership of their behaviors. And it's not one of blame, it's not one of pointing fingers. It's that we understand that these behaviors are adopted behaviors based on the environment that we grew up, and the beliefs that we choose when we didn't know how to choose it any better. Okay, we're at a very young age, and sometimes they carry on if we don't change it. And when we carry on, sometimes we find that they may not be useful now in our adult life in the role that we have. So I'll give you a quick example. I was coaching a client recently, a GM, and lack of recognition turned up to be one of the insights in terms of the behaviors that they don't do. And when we go to step two, I'm just sort of fast forwarding a little bit to give you the context. We found that she didn't get recognition, so she formed a belief, a mindset that it wasn't important. Okay, so that helped her to survive those years, because obviously it's a human need, whether we're a child or an adult. So that help to cope, right? So a lot of behaviors that we have now are really behaviors developed to cope in the environment that we grew up in. So in order to survive that, wanting it and not getting it, it's best to think, well, it's not that important. Okay. So that's an example of a belief that may have been there that they weren't aware of. Okay. And then, since it becomes like the norm, then we don't think about it. And that's why we have tools, for example, like what you have created. It's a great tool. I use it all the time, every single client, so that it's very objective as much as possible. So I use something called observed behavior 360 that I would have developed, that the language is very observable behavior rather than subjective judgments. So between that and your tool, the AccuMatch Behavior Intelligence Survey, we got and get a lot of data to work with. And of course, your system is created on really getting at a deep level in terms of the questions in the survey tend to be the trigger, and the response in between that tells us what the current programming is that people have. And that's really all that we need to change. It's the programming and nothing else that we really can't change. We can't change the environment. We can't change what other people do. So
you plug the keyboard in and you reprogram them.
So your tool has helped me a lot, and very importantly, it's helped me to be able to scale, to do this with more people quickly, more objectively, as the case may be. And then we go to origins and drivers in terms of understanding, what drives the behavior. And we know that mindset and beliefs are really the core drivers of behaviors that are not great for leadership. Okay, right. So we know knowledge and skills as well. So four things really: knowledge and skills. We categorize those together, and mindset and beliefs. But when it comes to leadership and leadership behaviors, they tend, and obviously we want to adjust the behavior, then we have found that mindset and beliefs have a greater impact on those behaviors as opposed to knowledge and information. So another real life example to bring that to life would be, I was working with another client, and lack of delegation was a challenge. Okay, and I mean, if you look at a typical delegation program, it would entail, what is delegation? What are the benefits of delegating? What can you delegate? What shouldn't you delegate, or can't you delegate? Who you should delegate to? But when you're looking at a manager who has 20 years experience, he knows all of the tasks in his department. He knows the people in his department. He knows what is to be delegated, what can be delegated. He doesn't need another training program on delegation, okay? So in that case, knowledge doesn't change the behavior. And what we discovered in our process is that it was driven by some fear. So if I delegate now these things, would I be as important to the organization? Would I be relevant to the organization? That is what we found in terms of what we call the core mindset. That's what's driving the lack of delegation. So once you get at the mindset and the beliefs, then you could rewire that, okay? And no, we don't plug in a keyboard at the back of the brain. To do that, there are various techniques.
That's too easy, right?
But what we use to it is also easy. And, various techniques that we use here in Nagui based on the particular client. It could be, finding the core beliefs, creating the new beliefs, as simple as the age-old affirmations, old beliefs, new beliefs, and you counter the old ones with the new ones. That's a sort of old-fashioned way, but it still works. Before we had all of this science, that's what the guys, if you read Think and Grow Rich, for example, that was the NLP they were doing in those days. Okay. So creating the beliefs that would be in alignment with what and how they want to behave. So sometimes it's a combination of the conversation, Nagui, because when at least the training that I have, and I realize it's not the training that all coaches have. Okay, so being able to ask the right questions, ask questions. So for example, that guy didn't delegate. I said, but didn't you tell me that you had a really great leader who allowed you to do so many things, and that's how you're able to get into this position now? Just by a question like that, and understanding how the brain works and how he thinks about that question. So how he thinks about that question helps in the rewiring process. Okay. We do unconscious installations as well by using things like metaphors and stories, for example, is how we do that. The other exercises too, because it's neuro and it has to do with the nervous system. There are other exercises as well to really calm the nervous system, create nervous system flexibility so that they're now able to do something that their system would have prevented them doing before. Because when you think about it, it's not that difficult to delegate. And as a matter of fact, most things that leaders need to do or what they would like them to do, it's not that difficult. Be kind, show empathy, listen. Okay, but it's just that they won't really wire that particular way. Okay, and it's easy to create that wiring once you know new wiring, once you know what those underlying beliefs are. So step 2 is really, really critical to understand what's there. And then now you know how to go about rewiring, and the mindset is part of it, but what really solidifies it is the action. Okay, the application and habit. So when you actually apply the stuff, like when you actually delegate and you see the world doesn't fall apart, then that creates that nervous system flexibility. Nervous system says, okay, it's safe to delegate. Nothing really went wrong. I still have my job, I still have my position, they still consider me in the organization, so it's safe to do this. So no, I continue to do it, and that's where the application and the habits now come in, and that's what really solidifies that new installation, if you want to put it that way, by taking action. And of course, again, understanding the brain loves celebration, so it's important to talk about the wins. So I always ask my clients, as we start off every single call, give me 3 wins, that you achieved between the last call and this call, and it puts it in a particular frame of mind. And again, understanding how the brain works, it's like if we celebrate this, if we acknowledge this as a win, then the brain goes out to find more situations and actually helps us to win, which then makes the process easier. So that's MetaB leadership technology. Okay. So that's the 5 steps to what we call sticky behavior change, because one of the number one things I hear from L&D professionals, HR managers and CEOs is that the change is not sustainable.
Right. It doesn't stay, right? So
yeah.
Well, thanks for that explanation. There's a lot in that, obviously, and I enjoy the fact, my simple philosophy is you got a trigger and a reward at the other end, so there's a pattern in between. The pattern is really the behavior. But you're unpacking it more about also looking at the neuroscience, the beliefs, and what gets rewarded. The brain then goes, yeah, I can do this. I'll do this again, right? So that journey of transformation is really important to make sure that people make that change for the right reasons, through the right rewards, recognitions, and so forth. Right. So it's great. You touched a little bit on AccuMatch, and you and I talk behavior all the time. So that's really the only thing that matters. In fact, we're doing it right now, right? So the AccuMatch, and you talked about the 360 that you've created. Can you tell me a little bit more about that one? Because a lot of people throw out 360s, and there are some 360s that I'm just not in favor of, to be honest. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in that area.
Yeah, well, I agree with you that there's a lot, and I see a lot of it out there, even 360s, performance management systems. What they have in there, the language that they have is still very subjective. It's still very judgmental, and I'll give you an example. Not exactly of a 360, but it brings it to light in terms of being able to convey behavior and explain behavior. And I think that it helps so much in so many areas of conflict and communication and that sort of thing. So I was doing this emotional intelligence program, and how I typically do it, I do it spaced out 3 hours once per week for 4 or 6 weeks, as the case may be. So what we do is that we allow people to go into the field and practice and come back and share some trigger moments and that sort of thing. So there was this case where I was asking a guy, to relate what happened. He said, I had a story, I was triggered, I was really upset. And I said, well, tell me what happened. And he said, we went to visit a client, and they started to ill-speak the company. And I stopped him. And I said, I am sure that didn't happen. And he said, Shane, how do you know? You weren't there. How do you know that it didn't happen? And I say, I'm pretty sure it didn't happen. And then I rephrased the question, or just add a probing question or a deeper question, which was, if I was a fly on the wall, what would I have seen and heard?
Yeah.
What would I have seen and heard? And I love the example that you use. If you had the video camera, what would you see? What would it have recorded? Okay, so what actually happened was that the client said, "Well, Nagui doesn't come and visit me." So this client is a big supermarket, and the company that I was doing the stuff with was a distribution company. So they, big supermarket, if one item goes off or is sold out and nobody picks it up, then sales are lost. So they require the salesperson to come in and check the inventory and that sort of thing. So if it's not frequent enough, then sales may be lost. So that's really the gist of it. So what the client actually said was, Nagui doesn't come and visit me, right? So if you listen to that and didn't get triggered by it, you'd say, well, but Nagui comes to visit once a month, on our records. And let's say the client is upset and he's like, yeah, but that's not, sufficient for me. And you don't get emotionally hijacked. You could realize that what he's communicating is that the real challenge is the frequency with which Nagui comes to visit. So therefore, it's the interpretation of the facts, which people then think is the fact.
Yeah.
And then they make they creates an emotion. So if I perceive that as ill-speaking the company, then I'll probably get upset, right? But I didn't. I processed it in a different way. So to wrap all of that is to say that he might have described the behavior as ill-speaking the company, but that is not what happened.
Yeah, it's the expectation that he had of a specific behavior that he was looking for that wasn't happening, right?
Yeah. So the 360, therefore, that I have it's really the language is written in. It's observable behaviors that we're seeing, not judgments of it.
Yeah. And and you're absolutely right. A lot of the 360s, I see them. They're worded very specifically around certain KPIs, certain things they're looking for. You don't really get the insight into what people really feel or how they think and or how they observe that person in giving the feedback, right? So I like what you do, and I do a similar thing. I take away all that stuff and I just say, tell me 3 things that they do well. Tell me 3 things that they don't do well, right? And just leave it open for people to express themselves. It's amazing the behavioral language that comes out when you give people the freedom to express themselves, right?
And that's a great point, Nagui, in the sense that, we have a lot of technology, and yes, we could create online forms and systems, but what you just said there is so rich and powerful, because when I have training sessions, and sometimes the companies anticipate that it's going to be a bitching session, and I was like, I don't do those, but people will. But a lot of information is gleaned because, as you said, you allow them to speak, and that is so much richer than any form could try and replicate. And I think that we have to be very careful in the use of technology. It's wonderful, but what I'm glad we have AI now, and my sort of thought process around that is to get AI to do a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis, so that we could now be more human. we could focus on that and have the time to listen to people and understand people, and not to understand people through a survey, or form or something like that. I mean, it's
well, you're the second person this week, actually, second coach actually this week that I talked to that is saying how AI is allowing you to forget about taking notes and all the distractions and be present 100% of the time for the client, paying attention. And that's really critical. It's a behavior too, right?
Yes, it is.
It's observed by your client. Oh, he's actually paying attention to me. He's listening. He's not just scribbling. What's he doing? Especially on Zoom and things like that. People go, "What's he doing? Is he checking his phone?" No, I'm taking notes. They don't see that, right?
And I heard something recently that that statistic in terms of verbal, non-verbal, it has really gone up to like 93% non-verbal. And so therefore, I love the technology. I mean, even if I am, most of my clients I do via Zoom, but sometimes even if it's one-on-one, I still flip it open so that it records the meetings and takes the most wonderful notes. So my head is not down, because when you even a split second, you can miss a very important cue. From someone. So, for example, I was I do some entrepreneurial coaching as well, and then also help people to advance their careers and to think differently. So, I was saying that when I had my coach back in the day, or one of my coaches back in the day, when I was looking to leave corporate and jump back out into my consulting, and she said to me, Shane, do you know that you could turn your annual income into your monthly income, and your monthly income into your daily income? And so when I said it to the client, so that's one example of installing a belief or possibility measurability in their minds just by relating a story that my coach was telling me. Because when you say stories, what happens, it bypasses the conscious mind, which wants to contradict. I was just sharing a story, but now that message would have bypassed his conscious resistance, and went in there. So that's one example. But and I know it went in because he raised his eyebrows, something like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
missing.
Yeah.
So that is telling me that his current identity and belief system doesn't match up with that. That idea is outside of how he sees himself right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
So a simple, yeah, something as simple as that. Okay, it's so powerful, and that's why it's so important to look at your clients and have that human connection, and therefore same thing in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, Shane, I want to recognize some of your accolades because you've done so many different certifications. I really take my hat off to you. You're constantly elevating your coaching level, even the new work that you're doing with hypnosis. Not that you want to be a therapist hypnotizing people into going around clucking like chickens, but but it's helping them break through that neuroscience. People have a misconception, I think, about what hypnosis really is. And you're pursuing your PhD, so it's really wonderful to be able to have an opportunity to speak to you about these things. If I were to go back a little bit and just talk about some of these 360s and assessments and forms, I want to share one because it was really an eye-opener when we were running, or when I was running the coaching firm. There was a program that was around employee engagement. And when I analyzed the assessment tool that was used to score whether your team is engaged or not, I found that it was really skewed to actually give you poor result. It wasn't really very valid. Did you find anything like that? Do you use tools like that, or do you go back to your methodology? If I put that back up here, does that allow you to also work with those kinds of situations?
It does, and I mean, even using your tool, I remember working with a group. Fairly large senior management group, 14 of them, and when you look at when you put them all together, as you could understand the culture of the organization, and of course, I think culture has a direct impact on engagement. Okay. And while I haven't executed too many engagement surveys per se, I think I used to do that in the early 2000s when in the early 2010s when I now jumped into the consulting field. But it's coming full circle again, because I think that these are some of the metrics that organizations want to measure and understand the engagement. And I think at the end of the day, the root still of culture and engagement and all that sort of thing is still leadership behaviors, right? Really at the end of the day, that is what they should be really measuring and asking, I believe, in my opinion. And in regards to that, therefore, I don't see a lot out there that actually do measure those things.
Yeah. So, if we look at there are some good things in those assessments. Like, did the team understand the organization's goal? Fine. Okay, tick or give it a score, how well they organize. But I think, like he said, until you do an AccuMatch map with all of the different traits, and you see the culture, what is culture? Culture is the consistent behavior that's observed in a group. Okay. So the group, when they are triggered, they all behave the same way, this way. And how do you actually unpack that if you don't have a tool like Acumatch.
Yeah.
And that, I think, the piece that's been missing. Yes, some of those were great. Some of the questions are great, but the methodology of how to recognize what's going on between people's ears, or what's being brought in as an environment that's supporting that, rewarding that, all of those things. I think your methodology really deals with that very well,
Yeah.
at a personal level, but also probably at a group level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I when I coached those 14 executives, everyone went through the same process, so to speak. You got different results, and that sort of thing. But although it's a process, everyone is different, because um, you know and your system, the Acumatch, helps us to understand each individual. And I mean, this week I did 3 of your surveys, and it's very interesting, the variety that you could get with different people around different behavioral patterns. That was really interesting. Yeah.
You mean we're still all unique? Yeah. So perfect. Well, Shane, it's been a pleasure. Look, we could talk for hours about all of these topics. Maybe we might, if you don't mind coming back for another session, we might maybe pick one area or one example and dive into that a little bit more. I'd love to see that as a journey. I think, some of our, guests or people watching this today might be also curious to see you in action with one of those scenarios. I think that would be really cool. If you don't mind me putting you on the spot for that.
I think that's what we need. I think that's really the next level in doing stuff like podcasts is really live demonstrations. It's because of everything that is happening. Now every professional in whatever field that they're in could get AI to write wonderfully great articles. So everybody now could be posting, and I think and people are doing videos. Okay, it's videos about what I do, but I believe that the clincher now is, let's see you in action.
Yeah. And I think the best way to teach someone, to show someone how something works, is what we always called role play, but using a real example situation. I can be your guinea pig if you want, so that'd be great. There's so much great stuff happening. AI is changing our lives. It's accelerating things that we used to take a long time doing. I'm even seeing, and I don't know if you've already done that, people are taking the Acumatch report and putting it into AI and getting more insight from a different perspective, instead of just the human, because AI doesn't have the context of your client, right? Only you have that. Only you can sit with them, observe their behavior, observe them nodding, all of these kinds of things. AI can't do that. But it can give you another perspective on that. Have you done that yet?
Well, I actually, when I was doing the 3 surveys this week, it's funny that you mentioned that I thought that, could I use AI to help me to further analyze this, because this is also my interpretation, which from probably my own biases. So I thought that it would be able to do that. But really interesting, Nagui. I believe that we have to stay present and alert. And the reason I say that is I believe it could have been 2 years ago. I follow Peter Diamandis a lot, and he is at the leading edge of what's happening in AI and the tech world. And just listening to him gave me an idea that helped my daughter a lot, for example. So he said, imagine that you will get a technology where let's say we are using a child is using the computer for learning purposes, and the camera is on, there's going to be an AI that will look at the individual, look at their eye movements, for example, and what if it could figure out if they're sort of not interested or they're not getting it, and the AI is able now to switch that lesson to a lesson that might be more suitable for that that child. And I thought about it, and then something snapped in my head, and it worked so wonderfully well, because we the times tables, right? For us, it was these things at the back of the book, and 1 2 is 2, 2 2s are 4, 4 2s are 8, and and trying to get a child to sit down and say this is crazy. And then it just so happened that I checked on YouTube that they have these people who sing the tables, like in popular songs like Taylor Swift, and there was some reggae version. So she was singing it, and she learned it, and she was happy. And research shows that people learn
in different ways,
faster and better when they're happy, and when they're smiling or they're singing, and it releases the serotonin, which helps in that create those new neural pathways and synaptic links. So So we'll get to that day very, very shortly.
Great. Hey, listen, Shveen, again, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your knowledge and wisdom. It's really refreshing, and as I said before, you're doing some amazing stuff. So congratulations. Yeah. Look forward to having you back. We'll watch for any questions online. If you see any, please jump in. Feel free to respond to people, and we'll do the same. And thanks, and enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you around in the next few weeks.
Sure. Thanks again for having me on your platform. Thanks again.
All right. Take care. See ya.